A tiny dragon had not always understood fear. In the early days of its life, everything had been warm, loud, and full of movement. Larger dragons rushed through the air above it, their wings beating like giant drums. They roared during training flights, searched for food together, and slept in wide caves lit by glowing stones. The small dragon had looked at them with innocent curiosity, believing it belonged with them. It did not yet understand why their eyes sometimes filled with disappointment whenever they looked at a dot from the moment it hatched. It was different. While the other young dragons grew fast, stretching their wings confidently by the first month, this one struggled to keep up. Its legs were shorter, its wings were too small, and its body remained tiny, no matter how much it tried to eat or move. The bigger dragons walked past it as if it were a shadow, and the strongest among them often snorted with impatience when it stumbled during group lessons. The dragon tried its hardest. It tried running with the others during morning exercises, only to fall behind every time. It tried flapping its wings during early flight attempts, but its wings barely lifted dust off the ground, while others soared into the sky with ease. The tiny creature often sat alone after training, hiding behind rocks, practicing in secret, hoping it could one day fly beside the others. But no matter how much effort it put in, its body refused to change. The larger dragons whispered among themselves. Some believed it was ill. Others believed it was cursed. A few simply believed it was useless. None of them ever said this to the tiny dragon directly, but it could feel their judgment in their silence. It knew something was wrong, but it didn't know what. The day everything changed, the sky was dim and full of clouds. The small dragon woke early and followed the others outside, expecting the usual morning routine, but instead it found the entire group gathered around the cave entrance. They stared at it with a strange, cold quietness. Before the tiny dragon could understand what was happening, the older dragon stepped forward and pushed it toward the path leading out of the territory. They didn't roar or explain. They didn't show anger or sadness. They simply walked until the group reached the edge of their land, then stopped. The little dragon looked up, confused. It chirped softly, hoping someone would lead it back to safety. But the only response was a deep rumble from the clan leader, a sound that meant leave. The tiny creature's heart dropped. It stepped backward, expecting someone to stop it, to bring it back, to show some sign of care, but no one moved. The clan leader growled again, louder this time, and the little dragon finally understood. It turned and walked away, staring at the ground as its small claws scraped the dirt dot. It did not look back. Hours passed as the little dragon walked through thick brush and rocky paths. Its body was already weak, and it could feel the chill of the morning wind. Every step felt heavier than the last. The land around it changed from the natural forest of its home to rougher, stranger terrain. Hills lowered into flat land, and the sound of nature slowly faded into the distant hum of machines. By noon, the dragon reached the outskirts of a small industrial area. Old metal scraps lay scattered everywhere. Abandoned vehicles rusted in the open fields. The smell of oil and burnt metal filled the air. The little dragon had never been in such a place before, but it was too tired to be afraid. Birds flew overhead, and a few small animals darted under broken machinery, but none stayed near the dragon for long. They sensed its weakness, and the world had little forgiveness for weak creatures. The dragon's legs trembled as it walked deeper into the scrapyard. A sharp ache ran down its spine, and it finally collapsed behind a large, rusted piece of machinery. Dust rose up in a small cloud around it. Its eyes half closed as exhaustion washed over it. It was hungry, shaking, covered in bruises from its long walk. The dragon curled up tightly, trying to preserve warmth, pressing its wings close to its small body. The new environment was noisy. Metal clanged from somewhere far off. Engines growled, People shouted instructions to each other. Every sound made the dragon flinch. It was used to roars and wind, but this noise was different. It was harsh and confusing. Yet no one came close enough to see it clearly, and that was a small blessing. Humans passing by caught glimpses of something behind the junk piles, but assumed it was some injured animal and did not go near. Stories about dangerous wild creatures around industrial zones kept most people cautious. As the day grew colder, the dragon felt its strength slipping. It tried to lift its head, tried to move its wings, but everything hurt. It had never been alone before, truly alone, with no warmth from the other dragons, no soft glow of cave stones, no guiding wing to follow. It didn't even understand why this had happened. Had it done something wrong? Had it made them angry? Had its attempts to fly been embarrassing for the clan? The little creature didn't know. It made a small sound, a quiet whimper, barely louder than a whisper. It hoped anyone would hear. But only the wind answered, rushing past metal scraps. Hours passed again. The sun dipped lower. Orange light stretched over the industrial buildings, making the shadows longer. The dragon tried to shift into a more comfortable position, but its legs buckled underneath it. Its stomach growled. It felt a burning in its throat. Not fire, but hunger. Night came fast, and with it came cold. The dragon shivered uncontrollably, unable to warm itself. Without the thick, heated air of its home cave, it could not maintain its body temperature. It pulled its wings around its small form like a blanket, but they were too short to give real protection. The wind carried new sounds at night. Snapping metal, squeaking hinges, low rumbling from distant engines. The dragon raised its head weakly every time, unsure if something dangerous approached. It sensed movement, sometimes small creatures, moving in the junk piles, but none came close to it. The scent of a dragon, even a small one, kept predators cautious. Eventually, the dragon's breathing slowed. Its eyes blinked heavily. Its mind drifted. It wondered if morning would come for it. It wondered if anyone in its old clan even noticed its absence, or if they had already forgotten it existed far away from where it lay. In a workshop filled with tools and blinking lights, a human mechanic was finishing his shift. The mechanic wiped grease from his hands, stretched his back, and stepped outside to lock up for the night. He heard something faint drifting through the still air. At first, he thought it was metal scraping against metal, maybe a loose panel shifting in the wind. But then he heard it again, a soft, trembling sound, almost like a cry. The mechanic paused, frowning. He listened carefully, turning his head toward the scrapyard behind his shop. The sound came again, weaker this time. Something about it didn't feel mechanical. It felt alive, while most people would have ignored it. Assuming some injured stray animal was lurking in the junk piles, the mechanic wasn't the type to overlook suffering. He lifted his flashlight and took slow steps toward the sound. The little dragon, lying cold and trembling, heard footsteps. It used the last of its strength to lift its head. A beam of light passed over the ground, then over the rusted engine block, then finally over the small creature trying to hide behind it. The dragon froze, thinking the human might chase it away or harm it. But the mechanic simply stared, his expression shifting from surprise to concern as he took in the creature's tiny size and shaking body. The dragon waited for fear or anger, the type it had seen many times before. But instead, it saw something it never expected, something it had never seen directed at it in its entire life. That it saw kindness. The mechanic took a careful step closer, his flashlight beam sweeping across the scrapyard. He had seen many strange things in his life-broken machines, stray animals, and even odd-looking birds, but nothing like this. The small creature lying behind the rusted metal looked different. Its eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. and its tiny wings, folded tightly against its body, seemed almost fragile enough to break with a strong breeze. The mechanic froze for a moment, unsure what to do, but the trembling in the creature made his mind decide for him. He knelt slowly on the ground, keeping his movements gentle. Every instinct told him not to scare it away. He had learned long ago that animals and even strange creatures could sense fear or aggression. He didn't want to be a threat. "It's okay," he whispered softly, almost to himself, almost as if the sound of his voice would calm him as much as it would calm the creature. He didn't know if it could understand him, but he hoped the tone mattered more than the words. The little dragon flinched at the voice and pulled its wings closer, curling into a tight ball. It had learned that hiding, being small, and being quiet were the only ways to survive. People in the past had shouted at it, or worse, ignored it until it hurt itself trying to escape. It didn't know this human, didn't know his intentions. And for the first time in days, it felt a strange, cautious curiosity. The mechanic reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small piece of food he always kept for stray animals, a soft, warm, nutrient-packed cube made for rescue purposes. He held it out gently. The dragon's nose twitched at the smell. It had been so hungry that it had almost forgotten what food smelled like. Its stomach growled, a weak but insistent reminder that it hadn't eaten all day. It looked at the mechanic, then at the cube of food, then back at the human. Hesitation filled its tiny body. The mechanic stayed very still, lowering himself to the dragon's level. He didn't try to grab it, didn't try to force it closer. He simply waited, knowing that trust could not be rushed. Minutes passed. The wind whispered through the metal scraps, carrying the smell of oil and rust, and the dragon's muscles twitched as hunger wrestled with fear. Finally, slowly, it stretched its neck forward and took the food, then darted back slightly, keeping its distance but accepting the small gift. The mechanic let out a small sigh of relief. That was a good start. He watched as the dragon nibbled cautiously, its tiny teeth biting only what it needed. It seemed weak, but it ate with a determination that spoke of survival instincts stronger than most. He realized immediately that this creature had endured more than any ordinary animal should. After a few minutes, he reached out again, slowly this time, letting his hand hover near the dragon without touching it. He wasn't sure how it would react, but he had seen how trust could grow from the smallest gestures. The dragon watched his hand, its wings twitching as it shifted slightly. It wanted to move away, but felt the warmth in his presence, something different from the cold abandonment it had known. After what seemed like an eternity, it inched forward and allowed the mechanic to gently brush the tip of his finger against its tiny head. The dragon's eyes widened. The touch was not rough or frightening. It was soft, careful, like a promise that it would not be hurt. Slowly, slowly, it began to relax, lying down more openly instead of curling into a ball. The mechanic smiled quietly. "There you go," he said, his voice calm and steady. "You're safe now." He knew he couldn't leave the dragon out here, not in the cold and not in the dangerous industrial area. Machines rumbled, scraps shifted, and humans sometimes came without realizing the risks. This little creature was fragile and alone, and he felt a responsibility to protect it. Gently, he picked up the dragon. Its tiny claws gripped at his arm instinctively, but it did not resist. Somehow, it knew that this human would not harm it. The mechanic carried it to his workshop, a place filled with lights, tools, and warmth. The smell of oil and metal mixed with the faint scent of food he had prepared earlier. The dragon's eyes scanned the room nervously. This was a strange new world, filled with unknown objects and sharp edges. It didn't understand all of it, but it felt secure in the human's arms. He placed it on a soft blanket he had laid out on a workbench. The dragon flinched as it felt the texture beneath its claws. He smiled and softly patted the blanket with his hand. "It's okay. You can rest here," he whispered. He didn't know if it understood, but his calm tone seemed to soothe it. Slowly, it stretched its wings a little, testing the room, testing the air. The mechanic watched carefully. He saw bruises on its tiny legs and scratches along its wings. It had been struggling for a long time, trying to survive despite its small body. He realized he needed to act quickly, or the dragon's condition could worsen. He fetched warm water and a cloth, gently cleaning the dirt and small cuts on its body. The dragon tensed at first, but relaxed as the gentle touch continued. It had been a long time since anyone had cared for it like this. He noticed its wings were unusually small, and its legs appeared weak. It was not just small. Something was physically different. He suspected it might be a type of dwarfism, something that made its growth and development slower than others of its kind. Even so, he admired the dragon's determination. Despite its weakness, it had survived abandonment and hunger and had come this far. Night deepened outside, and the workshop glowed warmly. The dragon curled up on the blanket, its eyes half closed, but still alert. The mechanic stayed near, keeping the light soft and watching over it. He brought water and more food, making sure it had everything it needed. For the first time in a long time, the dragon felt secure. It could rest without fear of being left behind again. Over the next few hours, the dragon began to explore the workshop cautiously. Its wings twitched as it tested the air currents, and it sniffed the tools and metal scraps that littered the benches. It seemed fascinated by the mechanical devices, the blinking lights, and the soft hum of the machines. The mechanic noticed its curiosity and smiled quietly. Perhaps it had always been intelligent, more observant than the others had realized. He stayed patient, letting it move freely in the safe space. He spoke softly, describing the tools and objects around it, almost like telling a story. The dragon listened, tilting its head, blinking slowly. It didn't respond with words, of course, but it seemed to understand in its own way. It had never had someone talk to it like this, someone who did not demand anything, someone who simply shared presence and attention. By midnight, the dragon had grown a little more confident. It stretched its wings fully, even if only for a short moment. It sniffed the human's hand again and allowed a small nuzzle. It was the beginning of trust, the first step toward forming a bond that would define the coming days. The mechanic smiled, quietly proud, understanding that he had earned its confidence slowly but surely. Sleep finally claimed the dragon, but it was no ordinary sleep. It was deep and warm, a rest without fear. The mechanic watched it for a long time, thinking about the journey that had brought this tiny, abandoned creature to his workshop. He didn't know how long it had been alone, how many dangers it had faced, or how many nights it had shivered in fear. But he knew one thing clearly: he could not let it return to the cold world outside. It needed protection, warmth, and care, and he was determined to provide it as the workshop quieted down. The mechanic cleaned up the space around the dragon, making sure there were no sharp edges or dangerous objects. He left small dishes of food and water within reach, and created a soft nest where it could rest comfortably. The dragon stirred once, sniffing the fresh water and settling back into the blanket, finally feeling safe enough to sleep fully. Outside, the wind howled gently through the night, and the world went on unaware of the tiny dragon hidden safely inside the workshop. The creature had been abandoned, left to face a harsh world alone, but fate had brought it to someone willing to care. For the first time, it had a chance at life beyond fear, hunger, and loneliness. The mechanic glanced at the sleeping dragon and quietly whispered, almost to himself, "You're safe now. No one will leave you again." The dragon, curled up and breathing steadily, seemed to sense the promise. It had survived, and now a new chapter had begun, one where trust, patience, and care would guide it toward a life it had never dared to imagine. And so the night passed, filled with quiet hums of machines and gentle breaths of a tiny creature learning to trust again. It was just the beginning, but it was a start, and sometimes a start was all that mattered. The next morning, the tiny dragon awoke to a soft light filling the workshop. Its small body stretched, wings fluttering slightly as it tested the air. It had slept better than it ever had in weeks, maybe months, and for the first time, it didn't wake up in fear. The warmth of the room wrapped around it like a soft blanket, and the scent of the mechanic's presence gave it a strange sense of safety. The mechanic entered quietly, carrying a small tray of food and a bowl of water. He placed them gently in front of the dragon, careful not to startle it. The dragon's eyes followed him, studying his movements. It had learned a little trust yesterday, but this new day would test how far it could go. He didn't rush. He set the tray down and knelt nearby, speaking softly. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" His voice was calm and steady. The dragon blinked slowly, tilting its head. It didn't respond with words, of course, but the tilt felt like acknowledgement. The dragon moved closer to the food, cautiously tasting a piece. It chewed slowly, savoring the warmth and taste. Its stomach growled again, reminding it how hungry it had been, and it ate more quickly. The mechanic watched, smiling quietly. He knew it had endured days without proper food, and seeing it eat with such determination warmed him in a way he hadn't expected after breakfast. The mechanic decided it was time to examine the dragon more closely. He gently touched its legs, wings, and tail, checking for injuries and weaknesses. The dragon tensed at first, but relaxed as he moved carefully, speaking softly all the while. It had learned that sudden movements could be dangerous, but slow, steady care was safe. The mechanic noticed that the dragon's wings were too small for proper flight. Its legs, while functional, were weaker than they should have been. It was not just small, it was a true dwarf among its kind. But even so, its eyes sparkled with intelligence, curiosity, and determination. He knew instinctively that with proper care, it could thrive in its own way. He decided the first step was to make the dragon comfortable. He cleared a corner of the workshop, laying down soft blankets and pillows. He made a small nest where it could rest, climb, and feel secure. The dragon explored the space cautiously, sniffing the corners, pawing at the blankets, and testing the air currents with its wings. It seemed curious, yet careful, learning the boundaries of this new environment. Over the next hours, the mechanic introduced it to small routines. He would leave food and water, then work nearby, letting the dragon see him without forcing interaction. Slowly, the dragon grew bolder. It would approach to sniff his hands, sometimes brushing its tiny head against his arm. The mechanic encouraged this gently, speaking softly, praising small gestures of trust. He knew that patience was the key. A creature that had been abandoned could not be forced to trust again. By evening, the dragon had begun to show more confidence. It moved around the workshop freely, hopping over low benches and exploring tools and objects it found interesting. The mechanic noticed that it was fascinated by moving parts, gears, and blinking lights. Whenever he adjusted a machine or tested a small engine, the dragon would tilt its head, watch carefully, and sometimes mimic small movements with its claws or wings. It was clear that the creature was intelligent, observant, and eager to learn. The mechanic thought about its future. The dragon could not survive in the outside world alone. It was too small, too weak, and too vulnerable. Predators, humans, or accidents could end its life in moments. He realized that he had to provide more than just food and warmth. He had to find a way to help it move, explore, and maybe even fly safely, despite its condition. He decided to start small. First, he would help the dragon strengthen its legs. He made a tiny soft mat and encouraged it to walk, step by step. At first, it wobbled, its short legs shaking under its weight. It would stumble and sometimes fall, landing on its side or back. But the mechanic didn't rush. He would gently lift it when it fell, whispering encouraging words. Try again. You can do it. Slowly, slowly, the dragon learned to balance, moving with a little more confidence each time. After a while, he introduced simple exercises for the wings. He would lift the dragon slightly, letting it feel the air under its small wings. The dragon flapped weakly at first, unsure of what to do. It had tried flying before and failed, and the memory of falling scared it. But the mechanic was patient. He held it carefully, guiding it through small, supported flights inside the safe space of the workshop. Over time, the dragon began to feel the sensation of lift. It was not true flight, but it was a start. Food, warmth, and care were only part of the solution. The mechanic realized that the dragon needed confidence, and confidence came from success. Every small step it took, every time it managed to walk, flap, or move without falling, was a victory. He celebrated these victories quietly, letting the dragon know it had accomplished something. The dragon, in turn, began to seek out his attention more, brushing its head against his hands, following him around the workshop, and even resting its small body against his leg while he worked. Days passed, and the dragon grew stronger. Its appetite returned fully, its muscles became firmer, and its mind seemed sharper. The mechanic marveled at how resilient it was. Despite everything it had endured, the abandonment, hunger, cold, and weakness, it had survived. And now, under his care, it was thriving. But there were still challenges. The dragon's small size made it vulnerable to accidents. Even a minor slip or a fall from a low bench could injure it. The mechanic began thinking of ways to protect it while still letting it explore and grow. He constructed small ramps, soft landing pads, and low platforms where it could climb safely. He created toys and puzzles using scrap materials to stimulate its mind and encourage movement. The dragon loved these activities, pushing small objects with its claws, testing levers, and even trying to figure out how some mechanisms worked. The bond between the two grew stronger every day. The dragon began to recognize the mechanic's voice and movements, following him from corner to corner, watching his hands as they worked on machines, and responding to soft words with small gestures of affection. It had never had someone care for it so patiently, never had someone guide it without judgment or fear. The mechanic had become its world, the safe space it could rely on. One evening, as the sun set and the workshop glowed with warm light, the dragon did something remarkable. It climbed onto a low table, spread its wings fully, and flapped. Not to fly across the room, but to feel the air lift its body slightly. The mechanic watched in awe. It was the first time it had used its wings without fear, and the confidence it gained from this simple action was clear in its bright, curious eyes. The mechanic gently approached and stroked its back. "You're learning," he said softly. "You'll get stronger every day." The dragon nuzzled his hand, a tiny gesture of trust and gratitude. For the first time, it seemed to understand that this human was not just a protector, but also a friend, someone who believed in it when no one else had dot as night fell. The dragon curled up near the mechanic's workbench, resting its head on the soft blankets. The workshop was quiet, except for the hum of machines and the gentle breathing of the dragon. The mechanic stayed nearby, keeping watch, knowing that this fragile creature had come a long way but still needed care. He reflected on the journey so far, how it had been abandoned, how weak and tiny it had been, and how far it had come in such a short time. It was a reminder of how resilience and kindness could change a life. Outside, the wind rustled through the industrial area, and the world continued unaware of the small dragon resting safely inside. But inside the workshop, a new story was being written. A story of survival, trust, and the slow but steady bond between a human and a tiny, abandoned dragon. The dragon slept deeply that night, its body relaxed, its mind calm. It had survived abandonment, hunger, and fear, and now it had someone to guide it through the next challenges. The mechanic quietly cleaned his tools, checked the dragon's nest, and whispered softly, "We'll face the world together. You're not alone anymore." The dragon twitched slightly, as if understanding, and settled back into its blanket. Finally free of fear, the workshop lights dimmed, leaving only a soft glow around the sleeping dragon. It had been a long journey from fear to safety, from weakness to the first signs of strength. And this was only the beginning. The tiny dragon had found hope again, and with the mechanic by its side, there was a chance to grow, to explore, and perhaps one day to fly freely. Days passed, and the tiny dragon grew stronger under the mechanic's care. Every morning, it woke to soft light and warmth, stretching its wings and legs, testing the boundaries of its little body. Each movement was cautious, careful, and yet filled with determination. The mechanic watched closely, marveling at its resilience. He realized that while he had rescued the dragon from immediate danger, the real work was only beginning. It was clear that the dragon was not just small, it was different. Its body shaped in ways that made survival in the outside world difficult. The mechanic spent hours observing it, noting the way it moved, the strength of its wings, the weakness of its legs, and the effort it took to even walk a few steps. He watched how it flapped its tiny wings, how it crouched before trying to jump, and how quickly it became tired. Something about it reminded him of people he had known who had been born with challenges, struggling against the limits of their bodies, but never giving up. The dragon's determination was inspiring, and he felt a responsibility not only to keep it safe, but also to help it grow stronger in every way possible. He decided to start by understanding the dragon's condition. He gathered books, manuals, and research papers he had collected over the years about creatures, anatomy, and growth. He compared the tiny dragon to regular dragons, noting the differences in bone structure, wing size, and muscle strength. It became clear that the dragon suffered from a form of dwarfism. Its body had not grown proportionally, and its muscles were underdeveloped. But he could also see signs of intelligence, curiosity, and adaptability that were far beyond what he expected. The mechanic realized that helping the dragon meant more than feeding it or keeping it warm. He needed to create a way for it to move freely, explore safely, and even fly with assistance. He started planning small exercises for strength and balance. He encouraged the dragon to walk longer distances, climb low benches, and stretch its wings while supported. The dragon was cautious at first, sometimes falling or stumbling, but each small success gave it confidence. It began to trust the mechanic more, following him around the workshop, watching his hands as they worked, and responding to gentle encouragement to make walking and climbing easier. The mechanic built small ramps and soft platforms. He created tiny obstacles for the dragon to navigate, helping it learn balance and coordination. At first, the dragon would hesitate, staring at the ramps as if unsure whether it was safe. But with patience and encouragement, it slowly began to move across them, testing its strength and balance. Each successful step was met with a soft word or gentle pat from the mechanic, and the dragon's eyes shone with pride and understanding. The mechanic also focused on the dragon's wings. He knew that true flight might be impossible without help, but he wanted the dragon to experience the sensation of flying. He crafted tiny, lightweight supports using scraps from the workshop, attaching them carefully to the dragon's wings. At first, the dragon flapped awkwardly, unsure of how to move in the air. But with the mechanic holding it and guiding its movements, it began to lift slightly, feeling the air under its wings. It was not real flight yet, but it was enough to give the dragon hope and confidence. He spent hours every day working with the dragon, alternating between exercises, exploration, and gentle play. He built small puzzles and interactive objects to stimulate its mind, using levers, moving parts, and shiny objects to engage its curiosity. The dragon loved these activities, pushing and pulling, figuring out how things worked, and learning from trial and error. Its intelligence amazed the mechanic. It was not just surviving. It was learning, adapting, and thriving in a safe space. The bond between the dragon and the mechanic grew stronger every day. The dragon began to follow him instinctively, curling up near his feet while he worked or brushing against his hands for attention. The mechanic began to feel a deep connection, understanding the trust the dragon placed in him. He had never cared for a creature like this before, and yet it felt natural. They became companions in every sense, one offering protection and guidance, the other offering trust and affection. One afternoon, the mechanic noticed the dragon looking out the window, its tiny wings twitching as if longing to feel the wind outside. He realized it had memories of flying with its clan, memories that had been cut short by abandonment. He gently picked up the dragon and placed it on a safe platform near the open window. The breeze brushed its wings, and for the first time in weeks, it felt the air lift against its body. The dragon flapped slowly, cautiously, testing the sensation. Its eyes widened with delight, and it chirped softly, a sound of joy and freedom. Seeing this, the mechanic knew that the dragon needed more than indoor exercises. He began planning ways to safely introduce it to the outdoors. He considered harnesses, small gliders, and controlled flights. Every step had to be carefully calculated to prevent injury, but he was determined to give the dragon experiences it had been denied. He wanted it to feel the wind beneath its wings, the warmth of the sun on its scales, and the freedom it had been born to enjoy. While the physical exercises were important, the mechanic also focused on emotional care. He spoke softly to the dragon, telling it stories of his own life, explaining the machines around the workshop, and encouraging it to explore. The dragon responded with small gestures, nuzzling, chirping, or curling against him for warmth. It had never experienced this level of care and attention. The mechanic realized that trust and emotional support were as important as physical assistance. The dragon needed to believe in safety and kindness before it could fully thrive. Over the following days, the dragon grew noticeably stronger. Its legs could support it for longer periods. Its wings flapped with more power, and its curiosity about the workshop grew. The mechanic introduced new challenges: a small climbing wall made of soft materials, miniature balance beams, and objects that required problem-solving. The dragon tackled them all with determination, sometimes failing, sometimes succeeding, but always learning. One evening, as the sun set and painted the workshop in warm colors, the dragon attempted its first unsupported hop from one low platform to another. It wobbled in the air for a moment, then landed safely, shaking slightly but proud. The mechanic clapped softly, praising the effort, and the dragon looked at him, eyes shining with understanding. It had achieved something it had never imagined possible. The mechanic realized that this journey was about more than survival. It was about teaching the dragon resilience, confidence, and joy in its own abilities. Every small victory built upon the last, creating a foundation for strength, both physical and emotional. The dragon began to move with purpose, exploring, testing, and learning, knowing that mistakes were not failures, but opportunities to grow. At night, the dragon curled up near its soft nest, exhausted but happy. The mechanic stayed nearby, adjusting small details in the workshop to ensure safety, leaving food and water within reach, and quietly reflecting on the progress. He thought about the abandonment that had brought the dragon here and how, despite everything, it had survived. Now, under his care, he had the chance to thrive. The workshop had become more than a place of work. It was a home. It was a sanctuary where the dragon could heal, learn, and grow. The mechanic had given it food, warmth, and care, but he had also given it something more profound: hope. The dragon now understood that it was not alone, that it could trust, and that it could strive for experiences beyond fear and weakness. Outside, the world continued unaware of the small dragon resting safely inside. Machines hummed in distant factories, lights flickered in empty buildings, and the wind whispered through the metal scraps. But inside the workshop, a story of resilience and trust unfolded. The dragon, once abandoned and weak, had found guidance and care. It had discovered that strength could be nurtured, and that even the smallest creatures could learn to thrive when given patience, attention, and kindness. As the night deepened, the mechanic whispered softly, "Tomorrow, we'll try something new. You're ready, little one." The dragon stirred slightly, as if understanding, before settling back into its nest. It had survived abandonment, hunger, and weakness, and now, with patient guidance, it was learning the true meaning of strength. The tiny dragon had begun to understand something vital, that life could be more than fear and survival. With the mechanic by its side, it could explore, learn, and even dream of flying. And for the first time, it dared to imagine a future filled with hope, care, and freedom, a future where it would not be abandoned again. The tiny dragon had grown stronger over the past weeks. Its legs were steadier, its wings flapped with more confidence, and its curiosity about the workshop had become boundless. The mechanic watched it every day, marveling at its determination. But he knew there was one thing missing. The dragon had never truly flown. Its wings were too small, its muscles too weak, and its confidence too fragile. He realized that if he wanted the dragon to experience the sky, he would need to help it in a new, creative way. The mechanic spent hours thinking, sketching, and experimenting. He gathered scraps of lightweight metal, thin wires, small motors, and soft fabrics. His goal was to build a support system, something that could help the dragon lift off the ground safely without straining its small body. He wanted to give it the feeling of flying, even if it could not do so on its own. It would be a combination of science, patience, and care. The dragon watched his work from its nest, tilting its head with curiosity. It did not understand the purpose of the strange tools and materials, but it sensed the patience and care behind every movement. The mechanic worked slowly, explaining each step softly as he went, even though the dragon could not respond with words. "This is for you," he whispered, fitting small joints and wires together. "You'll feel the air beneath your wings soon. You'll see." After days of careful construction, the device was ready. It looked like a tiny exoskeleton with delicate supports for the dragon's legs and lightweight extensions for its wings. The mechanic gently picked up the dragon and examined its reaction. The dragon flinched slightly at first, unsure of the strange device, but it did not struggle. It had learned to trust him, and that trust now allowed him to help it in ways no one else could. Slowly, the mechanic attached the supports to the dragon's body. He worked carefully, making sure nothing was tight or uncomfortable. The dragon shifted its wings slightly, testing the feel of the extensions. It flapped a few times, uncertain, but the supports held its wings steady, giving it balance and strength it had never known. For the first time, the dragon could feel the potential of flight. Even if it was assisted, the mechanic placed the dragon on a low platform and guided its wings in gentle flaps. At first, the dragon hesitated. Its instincts told it to stay grounded, to be cautious, and to avoid falling. But the mechanic's calm voice and careful hands encouraged it. "You can do this. Just try." Slowly, the dragon lifted slightly, hovering above the platform. The wind from its flaps stirred its tiny scales, and its eyes widened with excitement. They practiced this every day. The dragon would flap, rise a little higher, and then land safely on soft mats the mechanic had prepared. Each time it succeeded, the mechanic praised it, softly patting its back and speaking gentle encouragement. The dragon began to anticipate these sessions, moving toward the platform with eagerness instead of fear. Its small body, once weak and uncertain, began to gain confidence and strength with each attempt. The dragon's intelligence amazed the mechanic. It learned quickly how to adjust its wings, how to balance its body, and how to coordinate with the supportive device. It experimented, sometimes flapping too hard and wobbling, sometimes hesitating too much. But each mistake became a lesson. The mechanic never scolded it. He only guided and encouraged. Slowly, the dragon began to move with precision, flapping in smooth, controlled motions. One afternoon, the mechanic decided it was time for a bigger challenge. He raised the platform slightly higher, giving the dragon a chance to experience more air beneath its wings. The dragon looked down, its tiny claws gripping the edge. For a moment, fear flickered in its eyes, but then it remembered the patient guidance and gentle encouragement of the mechanic. It took a deep breath, spread its wings fully, and flapped with determination. The dragon lifted, hovering higher than it ever had before. The mechanic stayed close, ready to support it if anything went wrong. The dragon chirped softly, a sound of pure joy as it felt the wind beneath its wings. For the first time, it experienced what it had been born to do, not just move through the air, but feel it lift and carry it. Its small body moved with more freedom than ever, and its eyes sparkled with excitement. Day after day, they practiced. The dragon's muscles grew stronger, its wings flapped with more power, and its confidence soared. The mechanic introduced small obstacles, like soft hanging ropes and lightweight beams, encouraging the dragon to navigate through them while flying. Each success built its skills and trust. The dragon began to anticipate movement, adjusting its body instinctively, and the mechanic marveled at how quickly it adapted. The workshop became a place of flight and learning. Mats and platforms covered the floor. Wires and beams created courses for navigation, and soft lights illuminated the space. The dragon moved gracefully through this environment, learning not just flight, but coordination, balance, and control. Its wings, once weak and fragile, now held it steadily in the air. Its legs, supported by the exoskeleton, carried it safely on landing. It was a transformation that no one outside could have. Imagine the bond between the dragon and the mechanic deepened with every flight. The dragon trusted him completely, following his guidance without hesitation. The mechanic, in turn, understood the dragon's limits and potential. He had created not just a tool, but a bridge, a way for the dragon to experience the sky safely. He felt pride and joy every time it succeeded, knowing that the creature's resilience and determination had brought it this far. One evening, after a long session of flying, the dragon landed gently on a soft mat, breathing heavily but happily. It looked at the mechanic, its eyes filled with gratitude and trust. The mechanic knelt beside it, gently stroking its head. "You did it. You really did it." The dragon chirped softly, leaning into his touch. It had learned that the world could be safe, that the sky could be a place of freedom, and that trust could bring incredible rewards. The mechanic knew there was still work to do. The dragon's body was strong enough for assisted flight, but it still needed time and practice for full independence. He planned new exercises, new courses, and gradual challenges to strengthen its wings and legs further. But for now, he allowed the dragon to rest, basking in the joy of what they had accomplished together. The dragon curled up in its soft nest that night, exhausted but exhilarated. The small exoskeleton had allowed it to reach heights it had never dreamed possible, and the mechanic had been there every step of the way. It felt safe, valued, and alive in a way it never had before. The mechanic stayed nearby, adjusting the workshop for safety, leaving food and water within reach, and quietly reflecting on the journey. Outside, the wind rustled through the industrial area. But inside the workshop, a small dragon had discovered the sky. Its life, once defined by weakness, abandonment, and fear, was now filled with hope, trust, and the thrill of flight. And it had all come from patience, care, and the gentle guidance of someone who believed in it when no one else did. The mechanic whispered softly as he worked late into the night, "Tomorrow we'll go even higher. You're ready?" The dragon twitched its wings slightly, as if understanding, and settled back into its nest. It had survived abandonment, hunger, and weakness, and now it had learned to soar. The tiny dragon had discovered freedom, not by itself, but with a friend who never gave up on it. The night passed quietly, filled with soft breathing, gentle lights, and the sense of a journey that was only beginning. The dragon had learned that limits could be challenged, that trust could open doors, and that patience and care could transform even the smallest and weakest into something extraordinary. The mechanic smiled quietly, watching his tiny companion sleep, knowing that the sky was no longer out of reach. The tiny dragon had grown stronger and more confident with every passing day. Its legs had become firmer, its wings flapped with control, and its small body moved with the assurance of a creature who had learned what it was capable of. Assisted flight had given it a taste of the sky, and now each flap carried a little more strength and independence. The mechanic watched with pride, knowing that what they had achieved together was more than just survival. It was transformation. The dragon had also grown emotionally. No longer was it shy, hesitant, or fearful. It explored the workshop freely, climbed over benches, played with small objects, and interacted with the mechanic in ways that showed trust and affection. It would chirp happily when he entered the room, nuzzle his hand, or curl up beside him after long sessions of exercise. They were companions now, partners in discovery and care. The mechanic had become its protector, teacher, and friend. One morning, as sunlight filtered through the windows, the mechanic noticed the dragon staring out at the sky. Its wings twitched slightly, and it hopped lightly on the edge of the platform. The air outside carried a gentle warmth, and the dragon seemed to long for more than the confines of the workshop. The mechanic understood immediately. It was time to take the dragon outside. It was a risk, but one that had to be taken carefully. The dragon was strong enough now to experience real flight, even if still assisted. The mechanic prepared everything meticulously. Soft mats were laid out on the ground. Harnesses and lightweight supports were double-checked, and a clear, open area was chosen for the first outdoor flight. The dragon watched, its eyes bright with curiosity and excitement. It chirped softly as the mechanic gently fitted the harness and checked the wing supports. "You're ready," he whispered. "We'll take it slow. Trust me." The dragon tilted its head as if understanding and flapped its wings lightly in anticipation. They moved to the open space. The dragon's feet touched soft grass, and the wind carried new scents, flowers, earth, and distant trees. It raised its head, sniffed the air, and spread its wings fully. The mechanic held it carefully, guiding its first small lift. The dragon flapped with effort, but lifted slightly above the ground. Its eyes sparkled as it realized it was actually in the air, not just inside the workshop. The sensation was thrilling, the air beneath its wings both unfamiliar and exciting. Step by step, the dragon became more confident. The mechanic encouraged it softly, adjusting the supports only when necessary. Each successful lift, each hover, built the dragon's strength and self-assurance. Soon, it was hopping from one mat to another, flapping higher each time, chirping happily at the freedom it had longed for. The mechanic could hardly contain his smile. The creature that had been abandoned, weak, and fearful was now soaring, even if with help. Over the next days, they practiced daily. The dragon's muscles strengthened further, its movements became more precise, and it learned to anticipate air currents. The mechanic added small challenges, soft poles to navigate around, gentle winds to adjust to, and slight changes in elevation. Each challenge was met with determination, sometimes with hesitation, but always with progress. The dragon learned quickly, adapting and thriving under guidance and support. One afternoon, a surprising sight appeared. The people who had abandoned the dragon weeks ago appeared at the edge of the field. They had heard rumors about a small dragon seen in the industrial area and had come to find it. They did not expect to see it flying, even assisted, and their expressions changed from curiosity to shock. They had abandoned it because it was different, weak, and unable to keep up with the rest of the clan. Now they saw it strong, agile, and alive. The dragon froze for a moment when it noticed them. Memories of rejection, coldness, and fear flashed in its mind. It had remembered the loneliness, the hunger, and the abandonment. The mechanic noticed the pause and stepped closer, his voice calm. "It's okay," he whispered. The dragon chirped softly, flapping its wings in hesitation. It was a moment of choice, to retreat into fear or embrace the strength it had gained. The former owners tried to call it, using the tones and words they had used before, but the dragon did not respond. It had learned that they could not be trusted, that their care had been conditional, and that true safety and support had come from the mechanic. The dragon's eyes met his, and in that gaze, the mechanic understood the depth of trust and bond that had formed. It was no longer weak, abandoned, or dependent. It had found a safe, loving home. The mechanic stepped slightly in front of the dragon, protective but calm. He spoke softly but firmly to the former owners. "This dragon has found safety, care, and a chance to thrive. It no longer needs to return to a place where it was abandoned. You can watch, but it belongs here now." The former owners looked stunned, realizing that their decision to abandon had been a mistake. But the dragon did not look at them with anger. It looked at them with calm certainty. Knowing where it truly belonged, the dragon flapped its wings proudly, hovering slightly above the ground, demonstrating its strength and confidence. It chirped joyfully, a sound of freedom and survival. The former owners watched silently, their expressions a mix of awe and regret. They had thought it weak, unworthy, and fragile, but they now saw the truth. It had survived, adapted, and grown stronger than they had ever imagined. The mechanic knelt beside the dragon, speaking softly. "You've done amazing," he said. The dragon chirped back, brushing its head gently against his hand. Together, they had turned fear and abandonment into trust, strength, and independence. The dragon's eyes sparkled with gratitude and joy. It had faced the worst, and now it had discovered something extraordinary. A life built on care, patience, and love. Over the next few weeks, the dragon practiced more outdoor flights. The mechanic gradually reduced support, allowing the dragon to flap and lift on its own, while always remaining close to guide and protect. The dragon learned to navigate the air, hover, and land safely. It even began to chase small objects in play, testing its agility and control. Each success brought new confidence, and the bond with the mechanic grew deeper with every moment. The former owners eventually left, understanding that the dragon's place was now with the mechanic. The dragon did not resent them. It simply continued to grow in strength, choosing the life and trust it had built rather than the rejection it had endured. Its past no longer defined it. Its future was in the skies it had learned to embrace. As the sun set one evening, the dragon perched on a small hill near the workshop, wings spread, looking out at the horizon. The mechanic stood beside it, speaking softly. "You've come so far," he said. "I'm proud of you." The dragon chirped, leaning against him in a gesture of trust and affection. The wind lifted beneath its wings, and it flapped lightly, testing the currents with confidence. The workshop had become a place of learning, growth, and freedom. The dragon had transformed from an abandoned, weak, and fearful creature into one capable of flight, independence, and joy. The mechanic had provided more than food, warmth, or support. He had provided trust, patience, and belief in the dragon's potential. In return, the dragon had given him loyalty, companionship, and the joy of witnessing resilience overcome adversity. Night fell, and the dragon curled up on a soft blanket outside the workshop near the mechanic. The air was cool, filled with the scents of grass and earth. Stars appeared in the sky, twinkling above like tiny sparks of hope. The dragon chirped softly, a sound of contentment and security. The mechanic smiled, brushing his hand gently along its back. "You've earned this life," he whispered. "You're free to explore, free to fly, and free to be yourself." The dragon had survived abandonment, hunger, weakness, and fear. Now it had discovered the sky, trust, and care. It had found a home where it was valued, protected, and loved. Its tiny body, once fragile, was now strong. Its wings, once weak, carried it through the air. Its heart, once fearful, now trusted fully. The mechanic had given it a chance to thrive, and the dragon had embraced it with courage and determination. The world outside would always be unpredictable, and challenges might come again, but the dragon had learned something vital. With trust, patience, and care, even the smallest and weakest could grow strong, soar high, and find freedom. And the bond between the dragon and the mechanic would guide it through whatever came next. A living testament to resilience, love, and the extraordinary power of kindness. The night passed quietly. The workshop and surrounding fields bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. The tiny dragon slept peacefully, dreaming of open skies, warm winds, and the endless possibilities of a life filled with freedom and care. The mechanic stayed nearby, watching over it, proud of how far it had come, and ready for every new day of growth and adventure together. It was the end of one journey and the beginning of another, a journey of flight, trust, and the unbreakable bond between a human and the small dragon who had once been abandoned. The dragon had survived, learned, and thrived, and it would never be alone again.